into roll call. The movie you selected is
Bright,
starring Will Smith.
Neo Jack Swing Beat.
Hey everyone, welcome to Roll Call, the show where two childless millennials gush over movies and follow an actor's journey from their early years throughout their blockbuster hits.
Because let's face it, if I was able to hold a nice clamshell blockbuster VHS case in my hands, it would feel like a magic wand.
You know, there was something very magical about going to Blockbuster on a Friday night and finding that, perfect movie that fits your mood for the sleepover or the solo movie or whatever.
Did you see that reel I posted on our story of it's blockbuster footage?
Yes.
I was like, oh my god, this is it. This is what we talk about every opening.
It's the feeling, that blockbuster, you've got that blockbuster feeling. It's like something that was so magical. But hot off the press in the staff lounge, we started talking about Blockbuster at lunch.
So random.
A couple days ago, because we were talking about, when you get older, people start to one up and out old themselves, but yeah, are you this old? Are you VHS old? Are you beta tape old? Are you know what I mean? So the people will try and one up. And so they started talking about movie stores. And it's funny, we're at this age where we're obviously adults and sometimes it's a tough pill to swallow, but then we still will get slightly insulted if people think that we're younger than we actually are. So they're like, oh, you probably don't remember movie stores. I was like, excuse me? Blockbuster and Hollywood Video generation? Yeah, we grew, we have the chains, but then there were also mom and pop shops of video stores.
Yeah.
So I was like, how dare you?
We're in such a weird existence because we're between millennials and Gen Xers, Xennials, and then Gen Zers and Zillennials, and so we're we remember stuff, but
Yes.
okay, yeah, you could flex because you were more cognizant than I was, and we're so nostalgic that I might not have witnessed something or something, but I definitely know about it.
Yeah.
But
totally.
Yes. This is a movie podcast, and my name is Bria. And this ain't no small talk. This is big ass talk.
There are so many good one-liners in this movie. It's hard to find one. But hey, everyone, I'm Simone, and sometimes you just gotta be yourself. You know what I mean?
I did not think you were gonna pick that as your one-liner.
Well, I was going to say I'm just going to crip walk back to the barbecue, but I don't feel like I could have done that.
Can you crip walk?
No.
I can't even crip walk, so... Anyways, if you don't know, because you're just listening blindly, maybe, and that is not to say anything about those who are sight impaired, but we are talking about Will Smith in the Netflix exclusive 2017 fantasy action film Bright. So let's take a trip back to December of 2017.
And before we start, I just want to say that Bright, I first didn't know that this was a Netflix exclusive film.
I remember that being a big part of it, yeah.
Oh, really? Is this your first time seeing it?
Yes.
Okay, me too.
I had no inclination to watch this originally.
Yeah, same. But I learned that this was one of Netflix's most expensive films to make, to date. So I'm looking forward later to talking about visual effects, practical magic, one of my favorite things to talk about when discussing movies. But this movie has many fantastical elements. It takes place in modern day Los Angeles, but it's set in a world where fairy tale creatures live amongst humans. So for those who don't know, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the fairy tale creatures and their history that are in this movie. So Will Smith plays an LAPD human character named Daryl Ward, but his buddy cop in this movie is someone named Nick Jacoby, who is an orc. Now, I've only seen orcs in the Lord of the Rings movies. Have you ever seen other movies, Bria, with orcs in them?
No, and I've never seen Lord of the Rings, so this is my first.
Oh, you've escaped that fate.
I have
It's
my grandma tried to make me, which is like who's grandmas, or make me watch Lord of the Rings, but my grandma sort of was a movie lover, but I remember her putting it on and I fell asleep. So
Hmm.
I never ventured by myself back down that fandom, and then I never really. I have friends who love Lord of the Rings. Like Megan is a Lord of the Rings fan, but like I will say they're not a pushy fandom. There are some
Mm-mm.
fandoms that are like, "Oh my god, you've never seen this. You gotta watch this,
Yeah,
and you gotta." They're Lord of the Rings are just like they're just like, "Yeah, I love it."
yeah. Totally. I have by association of whom I'm engaged with, I'm now a partnership fan of Lord of the Rings. And I
A
tried,
fellowship.
it's a fellowship, one ring to rule them all. But I tried to like get into the series when I was a kid, but it's just this like beautiful shot landscape scenery of New Zealand that I'm just and this like beautiful music that I'm like do 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 like it just makes me want to fall asleep. So sorry, Lord of the Rings fans, don't come at me. Anyways, but orcs. So this movie has different adaptations, obviously, of orcs. And they are fictional humanoid monsters similar to a goblin. Orcs were brought into modern usage by the fantasy writings of J.R.R. Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings. And in Tolkien's works, orcs are very brutish, aggressive, ugly, malevolent race of monsters, contrasting with the benevolent elves, which are also in this movie, who serve some kind of an evil power. There is suggestion among several contradictory origin stories that orcs are perhaps a corrupted race of elves. But Tolkien's concepts of orcs have been adapted into fantasy fictions of other authors, and we see them throughout many video games and board games, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering. I guess those are card games, and Kevin's favorite, World of Warcraft. I'm not going to give you the entire spiel of orcs. There's lots of different histories, but interestingly enough, there's a lot of crossover talk between racism and orcs that absolutely cross into concepts of not just political but social commentary that follow into the movie Bright. The possibility of racism in Tolkien's descriptions of orcs has been debated. In a private letter, Tolkien actually describes orcs as squat, broad, flat-nosed, shallow-skinned or sallow-skinned, wide mouths, slant eyes, and in fact degraded and repulsive versions to Mongolian types. And so then there have been, unfortunately, uses of pictures of orcs that depict negative stereotypes against Asian communities. Peter Jackson's films of Tolkien's orcs have been compared to wartime caricatures of Japanese Americans, especially during World War II. But I thought that that was really interesting. You know, there's a lot of like myth and lore behind what orcs are, and they oftentimes look very different dependent on the artist who draws them or the visual director who creates them for movies. But I never knew that possibly they were kind of more darker origins to them.
Yeah, I know nothing about orcs, so I learned something. And I mean, I think the commentary on discrimination and racism and stuff is very apparent to me. I also think it's also really interesting that so many fantasy movies or sci-fi movies have commentary on racism and stuff through like other beings, and like we're still where we are. like Avatar, right, kind of has
Mm-hmm.
some tones of that. Planet of the Apes is another one. I think a lot of people think that there's like social commentary in that. Never seen those movies myself, but I mean, those are definitely talking points, I think, in the examination of those stories and movie telling. But interesting.
Yeah. Another group of fantasy creatures, races that we see are elves, which are a type of humanoid supernatural beings that stemmed from Germanic mythology and folklore, especially from Northern Germanic mythology. In medieval times, this kind of like rings my little history teacher bell. Germanic speaking cultures, elves generally seem to have been thought as beings with magical powers and supernatural beauty. They were ambivalent towards everyday people and capable of either helping or hindering them. However, the details of these beliefs have been varied considerably over time, and have even been flourished and within like Christian cultures. So it actually has this religious overtone with them. The word elf is found throughout Germanic languages and seems originally to have meant white being. That's why elves are typically very light, pale skinned with blonde hair. Again, depending on who your director or creative visual is going to be, you can either have an elf that looks like Orlando Bloom. Oh, well, yeah. So elves in this movie were like, again, stereotypically like bleach ass blonde, bright blue eyes, very pale skinned. And then you have Orlando Bloom that kind of perpetuates that stereotype. But then there's, other
I'm glad
different
you said
wigs.
that because I was like, how come there ain't no black elves? Like, that's what I thought. But good to know that
There
there is.
should be, but
There's, I
the,
mean, yeah, I think there's room to change that up. They're fake. Like, but
of
if
course.
there is a historical context, like, I can get around like going that route versus being like, oh, well, I never thought of a black elf. Like, so it has a historical reasoning why they're seen
Yes.
as they are.
And elves as a racial group themselves typically tend to be have racial tendencies themselves, like they think of themselves as very like pious and higher than other groups. Again,
Hmm.
if you ever sit if you it makes sense.
Yeah.
It goes all the way to the top. So if you ever, Bria, sit down and watch Lord of the Rings, you'll kind of see that with Orlando Bloom's elfish community. And then we also see it in this movie too. Elves think of themselves as very like high,
They live in
superior.
Beverly Hills. Like,
They're very posh. They have very nice clothes. They live
the
in
real
that like
house elves of Beverly Hills is probably like exists in the right world.
yes, but actually, that conversation about like what you just mentioned about how come there aren't any black elves, it reminded me of this like recent controversy, quote unquote, about the new Little Mermaid movie and
Oh,
how now you mentioned, okay, well, it's different because maybe within like history coming from these like whiter Germanic tribes of why elves might be depicted a particular way, but there were no rules on specific mythical creatures like mermaids to be of a particular
yeah.
skin color, racial features, right? Like, so it's interesting when people find things to get like angry or upset about.
Yeah. Well, what I mean by historical, like I said, elves are fake, so they can
Sure.
definitely be whatever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like if their origins come from like a white Germanic um culture,
Yeah.
then like I can wrap my mind around like, okay, they're being a little purist with this depiction or whatever. And it
Hmm.
works in this movie because of like the social commentary on race and discrimination and all that stuff. Little Mermaid, the best commentary I've seen is like, Sebastian is Caribbean and speaking patois, but Ariel can't be black. They're in the Caribbean anyways, right? Like, and I thought that was so funny. I was like, that is an excellent point. The the lobster, is he a crab? He's a crab. He's not a lobster.
He's a crab. Yeah.
Lobster mobster episode. Anyways, he's a crab. The crab can be Caribbean and played by Chowder Ranks, but we draw the line at Black Little Mermaid now. Like,
Plus, Triton was horny as fuck and had many different daughters by many different women.
yeah,
Who's to say?
yeah. Which I think her sisters are going to be very diverse in the
Yeah.
movie, I think. So that's going to be cool to see. But yes, absolutely.
All right.
Um,
So that's just a little bit of just the mythical pop culture, not even pop culture, but just a little bit of mythical history for you all. Now, this movie did come out in December, so around the holidays, I wanted to read out some of 2017's hot holiday toys.
you love talking about toys.
I
Watch
do.
out, Ryan. Simone's Toy Corner's coming for you.
All right, so according to Forbes, here are some hot toys of 2017. I'm going to talk about movies that were released this month after your pop culture corner. But one of the movies was a Star Wars Last Jedi. So Lego Millennium Falcons are coming back. This one was the Ultimate Collection series. It was 7,541 pieces of the Millennium Falcon, and it has more droids, more minifigs included in it, as well as everyone kind of from the like newer cast. Nintendo Switch was also really huge. The basic model with some additional options were available. I think the Switch came out in 2017, so it makes sense that it's a very popular toy.
What I
Um,
love about Nintendo systems is like they come out and people are like iffy on them, and then they're like the hottest thing and the hardest thing to get, and they like the popularity lasts so long. Whereas, like, to
mhm.
me, Xbox and PlayStation fans are always like, when's the next system coming out? Like, there are people still rocking with their Wii's, and like the Switch is what, 5 years old now?
Mm-hmm.
And still very much like relevant and playable and all that stuff. So
Totally.
it's fun.
Totally. Another toy that came out was called Cosmo, which looks like an unofficial child of Wally and Eva from the movie. But it's just kind of like a cute little robot that you can play. He's app programmable, so you basically download an app on your phone and you kind of can make him move around. That looks kind of fun. There were quarter scale action figures from all the way to Terminator, from Doctor Strange to Alien versus Predator. There's like a bunch of big quarter scale action figures that were pretty realistic. Um, lots and Legos. There was a McFarlane building set from South Park. McFarlane Toys had some bumps along the road because they were kind of like a Lego compatible construction system, but they really played on adult TV shows like Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, Five Nights at Freddy's, and South Park. So if you're a big kid, which is what I still like to call myself sometimes, again, I'm talking about toys. So if you're like a big kid and you can buy these little Lego sets for your favorite grown-up adult TV shows. Fingerlings were also really big. Those were little
That's a
monkeys.
terrible name.
They're like these little monkey finger puppet kind of things, including, we just talked about Suicide Squad a couple of weeks ago. There was a DC superhero girl set that included Wonder Woman, Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, Supergirl, Batgirl, which was really fun. And then just lots and lots of more Lego minifigs. So that's what I got for you this week.
We're gonna talk about Essence Magazine's top 2017 Black pop culture moments, and very relevant to the podcast. Number one is Will's wife Jada Pinkett Smith's movie Girls Trip came out in 2017.
Oh, you're right. Did you see
What a
that?
classic! I did.
Did you like it?
Hilarious.
It was
Yes,
good? Okay.
amazing. And I'm sure it sparked like, I mean, women have been doing this for years, so it's definitely based in cultural context, but I'm sure it just made more people like want to have that experience. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, go to New Orleans, people. The podcast Two Dope Queens existed in 2017 with comedians Jessica Williams and Phoebe Robinson.
Hmm.
I definitely know Jessica Williams from The Daily Show. Cardi B popped off in 2017, and Remy Ma came back and was gunning for Nicki Minaj with her
Mm-hmm.
Sheether song. But Bodak Yellow was a huge song in 2017. So where would we be without Cardi B? SZA's album Control came out in 2017. I'll be honest, I did not listen to this. I know the Broken Clock song was like everywhere, and that's partly why I didn't listen to it. But recently, I started listening to this album, and an amazing album. I think I talked about this before, but I can never not talk about this. Insecure came
Mm-hmm.
out, and Issa Rae blessed us with the characters of Issa, Molly, Tiffany, and Kelly. And then Jay Z's album 444 came out, which is like his answer to Lemonade, where he confirmed that he definitely did cheat on Beyonce. So it was not just creative licensing on her part, which sucks, but
Mm-hmm.
Get Out came out in 2017, and
Right.
huge moment in Black culture because it opened up the doors to be like, see, we can be in horror and sci-fi spaces and do it our way. And so shout out to Jordan Peele for that. But I remember everyone talking about that movie. I wish I saw that when it came out, but that's all I got from Essence.
All right. Well, in addition to Bright being released exclusively on Netflix in December of 2017, here were some other movies that came out. December is usually a big Oscar buzz month. So we have three billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri. That was the movie starring Frances McDormand. Lady Bird came out. There was The Disaster Artist, which was the making of the movie The Room, starring James Franco. That was pretty funny. Star Wars The Last Jedi, Ferdinand the Bull, Jumanji remake, Welcome to the Jungle, The Greatest Showman, The Greatest Showman, The Darkest Hour, starring Gary Oldman when he played Winston Churchill, The Shape of Water, and Pitch Perfect 3 were amongst some of the most
There were
popular
three of
movies.
those.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, sometimes Hollywood will make anything. There are no box office numbers for Bright because it's a Netflix exclusive movie, so it did not see the light of day in theaters. But the budget was estimated $90 million.
Yeah.
And just want to point out and note that this movie is also directed by David Ayer from Suicide Squad and
Mm-hmm.
Training Day. He wrote Training Day, Fame. And fun fact on IMDb, the writer sold, who's the writer? Say his name because he deserves. Hold the phone. Scrolled right past it. The writer Max Landis sold this script for $3.5 million.
Damn.
I didn't know you could sell scripts for that much money. So
Yeah, if like movie companies want your script or want to make your script into a movie, then and you're like a credible writer, you can earn bank.
yeah, so Netflix was the highest bidder, and
Yeah.
therefore they got to make this movie. And he took $1 million less because he wanted David Ayer to direct. So what a boss. So, all right, everybody, break out your prayer candles. We're gonna talk to our man, House of Lil Raj, Roger Ebert, Lil Raj in the house. We have a review for Bright by Brian Tallarico, and this was released December 22nd in 2017. Simone, how many stars do you think the House of Lil Raj bestowed on Bright?
Suicide Squad got 1.5. So did Collateral Beauty. Collateral Beauty was low, and we were very surprised about that. I think this person gave Bright 2.5 stars. 3 stars.
No.
1.5?
Backtrack.
One? Whoa! Okay.
Just one.
Damn.
And one of the star arms is like hanging off, like it's kind of like yeah, so Bright got 1 star. So let's get into this review and recap. All right. Netflix had an incredible 2017 anchored by 3 critically acclaimed films out of Sundance: Mudbound, Netflix had an incredible 2017 anchored by 3 critically acclaimed films out of Sundance and Cannes, along with a seemingly endless supply of new shows, including fantastic programs like Mindhunter, Dear White People, and Master of None. And yet, the irony of all of this is that what will be likely their biggest film of the year, certainly their most expensive at a reported $90 million, is David Ayer's Bright, a gaudy, overstuffed piece of blockbuster trash. However, if you think about it, the arrival of Bright makes perfect sense. Netflix has always wanted to compete with the big dogs at the studio, and you can't name a major studio that hasn't had an overdone, stupid blockbuster or two on their resume every year. Now Netflix has one too.
Jeez.
Ooh, man, this is like a roast. It's tempting to say that Bright is a reboot of Alien Nation or a modern hybrid of District 9, The Lord of the Rings, and End of Watch, a much better film also helmed by this film's David Ayer. And that might give the impression it contains a fraction of the quality of those films. No. What Bright reminded me of most of all was the glut of bad buddy cop movies that came out in the wake of the success of Lethal Weapon. Star projects designed to make a quick buck on marquee names, but with almost no artistic quality whatsoever. And many of them had similarly out there concepts. I'm thinking of films like Red Heat, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. Yes, this movie reminded me of Estelle Getty. Like Estelle Getty from Golden Girls? I don't know what that reference is, but that's what it says. Written by Max Landis, Bright imagines a world in which fantasy creatures like elves and orcs live alongside human beings. If you're thinking, oh no, this means we're going to get a lot of really basic lessons about understanding other races through a genre lens, you're not wrong. It's mere minutes before Will Smith's Officer Ward says, fairy lives don't matter, and we're treated repeatedly to paper-thin parallels between this world and our own. You see, Officer Ward has a partner that nobody likes named Jacoby, played by Joel Edgerton, easily the best thing about this movie. Why don't they like him? He's an orc, and they don't trust that he won't side with his people over his profession. In fact, everyone is convinced he recently did so after an orc shot Ward and escaped while Jacoby was chasing him. Over and over again, Landis treats us to a truly vague commentary on racism through the lens of orcism. And to give you an idea of how muddled and unclear this allegory is, Ward asks Jacoby, are you a cop first or an orc first? As we're watching cops beat orcs in the street. Huh? Does he have to be a bad cop first? I don't get it. And I don't think that the movie does either, other than to show that there's something that looks like a centaur cop involved in the beating. Neat. On one long night in this magical land, Ayer loves his one-night movies. Ward and Jacoby stumble upon a magic wand because, well, why not? As you might imagine, wands are powerful currency in this world as they can make the impossible possible. They're kind of the one ring of Bright, but only a bright, yes, the name actually refers to something in the film, not just how clever the filmmakers think their concept is. Wow, that's so salty. Can hold a wand without exploding. Still, everyone wants the wand, and so Jacoby Ward and a new friend named Tika, who is basically the result of Landis saying, how can we get a character like Mila Jokovich's from The Fifth Element into this movie, have to fend off corrupt cops. The feds, including a wasted Edgar Ramirez and a powerful group of elves who lost the wand in the first place, led by Numi Rapace. Smith, Edgerton, and Rapace. It's a decent crew, and the concept could have been developed into something intriguing if Landis wasn't so in love with it that he forgot to write decent dialogue. The banter here is insanely sophomoric, caught between Ayer's realistic cop movie aesthetic and the comic book movie that Landis wanted to make. Nonsense lines like, If you act like my enemy, you become my enemy, will merely have you scratching your head and wondering if anyone read the script before they approved the budget or if they just so adored the concept that they didn't care. Clearly, this is the kind of exaggerated nonsense. This is a nuclear weapon that grants wishes, and that's when the triple stupid shit is gonna start
Oh
being
my
two more
God.
being two more primo bits of stuff that only work if you're high. That could have been effective with a director like Robert Rodriguez to inject it with enough style to make it tolerable. The fatal flaw really is that Air and Landis don't seem to be making the same movie, although I'm not sure too many people can make the fantasy world of this flick and the action buddy cop movie blend. It's an absolute mess. It all culminates in an extended scene that's basically the interrogation torture scene out of those 80s and 90s buddy action movies, only this time people are screaming, "Where is the wand?" over and over again for what honestly feels like eternity. It's a scene that stands with the worst of the year in terms of structure and screenwriting, and it's where my hope that Bright might bring its bizarre elements together faded completely for me. I started to think of the worst summer blockbusters of 2017, like Transformers The Last Night, King Arthur Legend of the Sword, and The Mummy, and I realized how easily this ridiculous waste of money fit in with those crowd displeased. They may have been doing so in terms of quality filmmaking before, but Bright proves how much Netflix truly is running with the big dogs now.
Wow.
And I just want to say his profile picture on Lil Raj's website
Oh, I'm looking.
checks out. Like it makes sense to me. He's the editor of lilraj.com. Well, let's be a little more grounded than Mr. Brian.
Okay.
Simone, how many pumps of butter are you giving Bright?
Now, this person said that there are elements of this movie that only make sense if you're high. I'm gonna be
Were you?
honest. Yeah, last night, and that's why I fell asleep. And so it didn't make a lick of sense to me last night. So I had to rewatch it this morning to get a better grip of what was happening. So I disagree with you there. That being said, there were parts that I felt like it was a mashup between Men in Black, Bad Boys, The Fifth Element, Lord of the Rings, and then like the funny buddy cop movie, The Other Guys with Will Smith, or Will Ferrell and
Kevin Hart.
nope, Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg. It's really funny. Eva Mendes is in it too. But and there was like a lot of shouting and a lot of like chaotic stuff going on. That being said, I feel like this movie deserves more credit with its creativity of using modern day scenery and set and pulling in this fantastical element, because usually when we get fantasy movies that have things like orcs and elves and fairies and stuff, it's set in that medieval era. Again, my preface is Lord of the Rings there. So I thought it was at least unique, and it reminded me a little bit of Baz Luhrmann movies that pull in like a really great soundtrack to go with some of your action scenes. But it wasn't, I think there are still some parts that really like missed the mark for me. So I'm giving it 2.5 pumps of butter.
Right.
I did eat popcorn while watching it though.
Oh.
And I finished it. It was like a nice little medium bowl of popcorn.
I was torn between like 3 and 3.5. I think I might go 3. I know, and I definitely felt like I had a bias coming into this movie because I knew that this was like a big dud for Will, and probably more so than Nap. Like I feel like I heard so much about how terrible Bright was.
I didn't
And
hear
maybe,
anything about this movie.
yeah, maybe it's the Netflix of it all because of the budget and the exclusivity and all that stuff, and them like, venturing into this like arena of studio type films. But yeah, so when I first started watching it, I definitely had some like snarky kind of questions and stuff. So like some of my questions were like, even after watching the trailer, I was like, what is this world that they have created. Like, I don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did note that it's interesting that we can understand magic and alien creatures in worlds where there's space travel or mystical lands,
Mm-hmm.
but not every day, like not South Central LA, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, but Men in Black, but like all that Men in Black and Harry Potter came to mind. And I was like, but all the magical stuff is like separate, or the aliens are hidden in plain sight. They're not just out in the world existing
Mm-hmm.
with us, like in their raw form. So I was like, that's very like these questions just made me appreciate this movie more. And then like, what's the message of this movie, the commentary with like the orcs and stuff? I was trying to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came to the conclusion I felt like this would have been better as a series than a movie. Like the world
Oh.
building and the explanation of like orcs and the history and all that stuff would have been helpful to me. But my final thought was that when you have a career, and after watching like Comic Con interviews and his interviews with Joel and stuff, you know, after Will talk calls this like Training Day meets Lord of the Rings, and I could see
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like when you have a career like Will's, it's like, what hasn't he done? Like, we talked about this, and we
Mm-hmm.
were like, there's been so much diversity. He's done like kind of every type of movie. And I can only imagine you read a script like this, and you're like, okay, cool, edgy buddy cop kind of vibe. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
I've done Men in Black. I've done Bad Boys. Cool. Oh, wait, there's mystical creatures in this and like magic and shit. Like, I've never seen that. I've never done that. And so I could
Yeah.
see why he would want to do this movie.
Mm-hmm.
So for that, and I do think that it's entertaining and it's not as like hard to wrap your head around as Brian seems to think it is. That's where my three comes from. But
Yeah.
don't be
Totally.
biased stuff. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And honestly, I didn't hear about this movie at all. And in fact, when I talked about watching it this weekend with various people, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I haven't heard of that." It wasn't the same visceral reaction that I might have gotten with Suicide Squad or After Earth, where people are like, "Didn't that movie suck?"
yeah.
I'm like, regardless, I gotta watch it, you know?
Yeah.
So,
I did know that. I think Samantha Loveful 99, if you haven't listened to that episode, she did Shark Tale with us. But I remember her saying that she enjoyed Bright. And so I had like, okay, she liked it, but usually been pretty negative,
hmm.
critical appeal. So, and we all know by this point that we don't always agree with critics, and clearly we don't this time. But
Hmm.
so yeah, I went into it with a bit of like, okay, how bad is he in my mind? But part of what makes this movie great is the cast. Let's talk about, well, should we talk about the trailer? I feel like the trailer
Hmm.
is definitely like, that's where like most of my questions initially came from, because I watched it
Same.
right before and I was like, how does this
Yes.
work? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that that's where the movie missed some of its part for me, because one thing I appreciated about After Earth was that they included some of that background story of how Earth came to be many years later in the future and like why they were there on that mission, versus the movie just starts with us, with the viewer just believing that like, okay, all right, this is Los Angeles, but it's like Los Angeles with mythical fairy tale creatures and them, and we're just supposed to be like, okay. And so there's definitely story plots and storylines that they could have talked about. They talked about like why orcs and humans don't beef, or don't, sorry, why orcs and humans like don't get along with each other, and why orcs are looked down upon, and how elves get into the mix, and like what happened to magic and fairy because it was like an outdated practice. So why this like magic wand might exist. So I agree with you there. And with the trailer, it again, there's no contextual background of like how this world came to be. So I think you're right. I think it could have been cool as a series where the first couple of episodes like built into the gritty of the story. Because honestly, what did I write down? It took 43 minutes for like the real plot and story to start, for like Tika to get in
yeah.
there. So
Yeah, it
there
did
was,
take a while.
yeah, it took a while.
Yeah, so Yeah, the trailer, not something I would have seen and been like, oh yeah, I want to watch that. You see Will's new movie? I would be like, oh, that's like
Hmm.
not for me. But the cast. So besides Will, we have Joel Edgerton, who I recognized once I was watching interviews. I was like, oh shit, he's Jacoby. Really good makeup, which I want to talk
Really
about
good.
later. But I recognized him from the Hollywood Roundtable talk Will was a part of. He was there for Black Mass, so I was like, oh, boom, yeah, he's in Black Mass. Like, I was like, they've been in a movie together, and part of that is probably because Danielle just sent pics of Will with like multiple like co-stars he's been in multiple movies with, and so I
Hmm.
was like, oh, he's another one, and I was like, no, he's not. He was in that talk. So I was like, but anyways, I feel like I'm like he's like maybe it's the Australian of it all, but him and
Hmm.
Margot Robbie are like growing on me. I'm like I might have to watch some more Joel Edgerton movies, but I really liked his Jacoby. I felt like I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who was playing him.
Hmm.
And so I was impressed. I was like, whoever this actor is, like really good. And then
Hmm.
finding out it was him, I was like, oh damn, like I absolutely would not have guessed it. But he was surprisingly like funny, and I know he's like a pretty serious kind of dramatic actor. So it's cool to see him in that role, and I think that was like part of the fun for him in doing this movie. But I thought him and Will's chemistry was really good too, like especially knowing that Will has done buddy cop type movies with the likes of Martin Lawrence for years and
Hmm.
sequels and stuff, and Tommy Lee Jones, and him being able to like not necessarily fill their shoes but kind of sit in their seat next to him and do that well. And it kind of reminds me of Josh Brolin stepping into Men in Black 3. Like,
Yeah.
it could have felt like awkward and weird, but their chemistry was really good. And then, yeah, like I really like Jacoby. Like, he makes you like,
Yeah, his character reminded me a lot, not just in looks, but in personality too, of Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy, who is
mm,
played by
Dave Bautista.
you got it. It was Dave Bautista. Yes, his character
That
reminded.
like that like robot filter, like ah.
So
That
yeah,
wasn't even a good impersonation. Anyway.
I thought he was great. I liked his. I don't know if this is like necessarily a Jacoby thing or an orc thing, but his personality was very blunt, and had like an interesting way of wording things. He spoke perfectly fine English, but then there's also an orc language that goes with it too. So orcs can speak orcish with each other, but like they also understand English too.
Yeah.
So, and I thought that his like mannerisms and dialogue were pretty like funny. So he was definitely more of the emotional, sympathetic piece, but in addition, with the comedic timing and the way his dialogue was written, or at least played by him, also semi-comedic as well.
Yeah. I love too his like he has like this naivety to him, like
Definitely.
where it's like he doesn't like and he's kind of is he a rookie? I think he's a rookie technically, like cuz he's the first orc
Pop.
police officer.
Yeah.
And so I think there's like a naivety and like a greenness to him. And Will's character, Daryl Ward, is very much kind of the Danny Glover, the Tommy Lee Jones, like
Mm-hmm.
the Martin Lawrence, the
Mm-hmm.
Marcus Burnett. Like, I'm too old for this shit. I'm tired. I'm just trying to retire. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then I feel like the training day aspect of Denzel's character is a little bit like his like brashness and like his shit talking, like the way he talks. But anyways, but Jacoby's like naivety is like also what makes him funny. Like one of the
Yes.
lines that or one of the moments that's funny is like they're in a shootout and he's like and Daryl's like, "You good? You got any holes in you? Like, have you been shot?" And he's like, "No, just the holes I was born with." And then he's like, "How's your holes?" And he's like, only you would make a shootout awkward. And so like that moment is like just like his just the naivety of
Yeah.
him asking that is just so kind of pure. Or even deeper moments like when he first shoots a human being and kills them, and he's kind of stunned, and Daryl's like, hey, we're still trying to
Uh-huh.
get out of this situation, like you gotta come on and get over that. So like those nuances of how he played this character, I think were, and I don't know if that's how it was just written, but it was really well acted in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Bravo to Edgerton, my bad.
Yes.
Next, we have Numi Rapace, who plays Layla, who is the big villain, the evil elf, whose wand that they have and who they're trying from raising the dawn.
Dun,
And
dun, dun.
gave me very much Voldemort vibes. I was like, oh, okay, she's Bellatrix Lestrange.
Yeah,
Like,
essentially.
I thought she was really good. She looked really beautiful in the makeup, real badass. Like the elves when they were like going after the wand and like encountering like gang members and the feds and the LAPD, they were just like, it's very much Quentin Tarantino like Kill Bill in there.
Totally.
So
Very
she
good
was,
assassin.
yeah. And then I think her strongest acting moment was towards the end with Tika, because I was like, okay, why is she all up in her face like that? Like, are they lovers? Like, is that her daughter? Like, what's going on here? And then when she was like, what have you done to my sister? And I was like, oh, sister's
There's
great.
this.
Okay. But yeah, I thought she did a great job.
Mm-hmm.
Next we have Lucy Fry, who plays Tika, who
Mm-hmm.
is very much, she reminded me a lot of Julie in Bad Boys, like very much just getting dragged along through the action
Yes.
because she's at the core of like what happened and stuff, but not a lot of dialogue. So I wouldn't say like anything amazing stood out to me there, but I don't think anything bad stood out either. So
Yes, I loved her outfit. She wore denim overalls with a little flower printed on the bib and ran around in sneakers the whole time. I was like, this is 100% something that I would wear.
yeah, she had a lot of physical acting, like when she saved
Yes.
Jacoby and the end, and those moments of magic stuff where
Mm-hmm.
she had and poor girl, like not that many lines, but definitely a whole lot of running and a whole lot of like physical
Yes, and not a whole
acting.
lot of lines in English because the first
Oh
half
yeah,
she spoke in Elfish and she was just kind of like, which Jacoby kind of understood. But it was just a lot of like scared, kind of not screaming, but yeah, like scared acting,
shook.
shooketh acting. It reminded me again of, I do agree that it, with from the writer from Little Raj, that it reminded me of Mila Jovovich from The Fifth Element, who like didn't really speak like Bruce Willis did and just kind of had to like mime her way through until she started to learn, because she was a very powerful, learned being, so that she like could catch on really quickly. But then later on it is revealed that she does speak English, and she was like, I just needed to know that I could trust you. Because she is a bright and she can hold the wand or wield the wand without being blown to smithereens. So that, I think you're right. Not a lot of spoken dialogue, but a lot of physical acting and body acting. So she did good. She's really pretty girl.
Yes. Kind of looks like play like Margot Robbie's little sister.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have another bad guy played by Edgar Ramirez. When I was watching the Comic-Con panel, I was like, who's that guy? Like, who did he play? And wait, is he the bad guy or is he the magic federal agent?
He's the one of the magic in the blonde wig.
Okay, this other dude's the elf. Okay, wait,
I think Candomir, unless he was an orc.
no clue.
I on it
He
was a
did his
little
job. Clearly we don't know which job it was. So sorry to this fan, but he did his job and it was solid. And I feel like I sound real. So moving on. I do want to point out we have some Suicide Squad sprinkles in here.
Sure do.
We have Jay Hernandez, who was Diablo in Suicide Squad, but this time he's playing the Sheriff Rodriguez, who is a comrade of Ward and tries to help them and is a sheriff. And so I was like, that? And I was like, that, but IMDb baby helps you out. So his part was small. I wish he was like kind of in it a little bit more because he got
Yeah.
killed like right after he was
He
trying to help them.
yeah, he was like an elfish assassin or something.
And then the other actor who was in Suicide
Suicide
Squad.
Squad. Ike Barinholtz.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was Griggs in Suicide Squad, so he's like
Mm-hmm.
a cop, and he's a cop here. And oh, funny Suicide Squad. Fun fact is
Mm-hmm.
that Joel Edgerton could have been what's the
Flag?
guy? Yes.
Rick Flag?
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I kind of would have liked that better. Like, no shade
I
to that actor, but
Yeah, honestly, I probably because Joel Edgerton has played he was in Zero Dark 30, the movie about hunting Osama bin Laden.
mhm.
He was also in the Great Gatsby movie adaptation. That's a Baz Luhrmann crossover, but yeah, he can play like an asshole really, really good. But then he's like so cute and friendly that you're like, oh, but it's okay. And
Yes.
I just also want to confirm that Edgar Ramirez was the magical FBI police with the long wig.
Okay, he was
With the
serving
blue.
some looks
He was
because
unrecognizable.
I that was in my notes. I was like, okay, but this elf with the blue hair is like giving like okay, GQ. So good job for you, sir, for looking pretty. And so pretty and different that I couldn't
Hmm.
recognize you from your bearded IMDb picture. So, um, I mean, like the review said, he is kind of underutilized, and I'm assuming he has a pretty good acting resume for them to say that. But yeah, like the federal agents in this movie weren't a big deal, so they were kind of just like there, like chasing them around, but not really doing much. So
Hmm.
sorry to that man. Anybody else? Oh, shout out to Margaret Cho.
Yay, Bay Area native and
Yes.
comedian.
And a badass police. It looked like she's like a sergeant or like,
Yes.
one of those top popo. Anybody else?
The other person who played alongside Edgar Ramirez was Montague, but he's played by an actor named Happy Anderson. We're going
What
to
a name, Happy.
I know. He looked really familiar to me, but then when I clicked on his IMDb page, I'm like, I don't really think I've seen much of him, but he has a very unique look. I mean, it's obviously
We'll
he's
see him again
we
shortly.
will. Yes, that's what I was just about to say. We're gonna see him again in Bad Boys for
Oh, he's
Life.
in Bird Box? That came out a year
Nice.
after this on Netflix. So see, Netflix got it there afterwards.
It's fine, it's fine. But shall we talk about the man of the hour?
Yes, we shall. Sir Willard Carroll.
Yes.
Well, I think this is clearly a good. I don't want to say he willed himself through this movie, but he definitely. This is like a mashup of so many characters we've seen. Like I said before, there's definitely some Jay from Men in Black. There's some Mike Lowry in here. There's even some. I forget his character's name in iRobot, but I feel
Mm.
like his like sourness towards like orcs and stuff definitely reminds me of like Homeboy hating on robots in iRobot.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, this wasn't. I think if anything, it just showed me because like I think Wild Wild West, he was supposed to be like the straight man, kind of like the serious, one, and he didn't do that so well then. And so to see that growth throughout all those other movies I mentioned and see it show up here, I feel like this was like a good testament to his growth as an actor and his ability to grow and combine all those things and take those things from those other movies into one. I there were like some glimmers of like kind of funny Will,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I mean, I don't think it was bad acting or anything. I think it's just like the premise of this movie. I think is was probably too much for people to wrap their like.
I agree. And this is a role that Will definitely is comfortable with. And we seen iterations and sprinkles of characters like that before. So I don't think that there was really anything wrong. I like that you said the word sour. You can tell that he's been a police officer for a while, and then perhaps a police officer who's very hesitant about working with an orc, and then especially because Jacoby had shot Ward got shot, and you mentioned this earlier, Jacoby let the person get away, but it turns out that he was letting another orc get away that was like just a young kid
Yeah,
and was like
mistaken identity.
mistaken identity kind of thing. And he's like, dude, if we had gotten this kid, like he would have died, like no questions about it. And that turns out to kind of almost save his life later when they get captured by a gang of orcs. So I like that it's an interesting role for him to be on. And there's this great interview with the entire cast where he talks about the racism and overlying social issues that are in the movie. And again, leave it to Will to kind of go into that psychology piece of what a police officer might feel of having this pressure to uphold the badge, uphold the law, and then also get over your own like prejudices and stereotypes against groups of people, knowing that your job, no matter what, is to protect others and serve the community. So I linked that one. Did you watch that interview, that group cast?
Probably. There's so many.
There are a lot, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many. So there might be ones I missed, but I feel like as we've gone through like the bigger, well, just the more modern movies have so many interviews and like little things. But like we learned on JLo's season, a lot of times interviews don't ask them anything new. So you're like,
Yes.
great, I just wasted 5 minutes of my time watching this interview where you asked them the same things the last interview asked them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that commentary on the racism part, and I actually really, and I don't know, maybe if it's like my newfound love and appreciation for Joel, but a lot of the stuff he said in interviews really grasped. You know, he talked about like how much of a challenge it was to step into like this unknown world, which I was like, okay, that kind of answered my question about like, what's this world that we're getting, like where it's like the real world and all this kind of chaos happening in LA, and you have orcs and elves walking around and stuff. And so I was like, okay, that made me understand why they would want it. Like, okay, yeah, this is completely different than like what you would probably ever see these creatures in their surroundings. And then his point about where does this movie go, which is very true. I was like, I have absolutely no clue where this story is going, and I wasn't able to like connect the dots along the way. And I think sometimes that's not so fun for moviegoers, but like I didn't mind that this time. Like I don't love it either when I'm like, oh, I know what's gonna happen. Like rom-coms are very textbook. Like, okay, yeah, like they can't be together, but then like they find a way and blah blah blah. So I had no clue where this movie was going. The ending either. I thought it was going to end at a couple of different points, and I was like, oh, there's more. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, I feel like Will he's clearly a leader as always on these kind of casts and stuff. So I feel like most of his interview stuff, I will come out like hyping the fans up. Did you see this is also when he started to do social media more. So his YouTube channel, there's a video of him going to Comic-Con in Brazil in an orc mask.
Yes, and he surprised them.
Yeah, and he like climbs on the box and it's just like, and like the amount of people in there, like, you know, with him, and then he has like a moment where he has like a selfie and it's like a theater of people. Is just like seeing his movie stardom, like oh my God.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
He is that person. And I the only thing that I wasn't sure about with his character was what the motivation was, like what his Because with Suicide Squad, we talked about how despite being this like ruthless assassin as Deadshot, he still wanted to he like made the choices that he did in life to protect his daughter and like provide for his daughter, right? And even when he got out of jail and was like negotiating with Amanda Waller, one of the two, was like, I want full custody of my kid, I want visitation, or I want to be able to like be in her life, provide for her, and all that stuff. And he had a daughter and a partner in this movie, but they were so secondary that I wasn't really sure like what their purpose served besides, showing him that he was a police officer with a family. And I know that there was concerns that his family or partners thought like, okay, you're risking yourself and risking your life working with Jacoby, and that you should try and get a new partner. And even the corrupt police officers in the police station, unfortunately, Margaret Cho was one of them. And Baron Holtz was also in there. There were people in his team that were also trying to convince him, like, we got to kill him off and then cover it up. We got to get you a new partner or else you're going to get yourself killed. But all that being said I still didn't understand like what his motive was as a character. And we learn, spoiler, that Daryl is a bright. Daryl Ward is a bright, and so he is able to wield the magic wand and not destroy himself. So I thought that was really interesting, but we didn't see others besides the like hint of the prophecy that was told by the orcs. We didn't see other elements of him being particularly gifted with magic. So that was the only thing that I kind of wish was a little different, that he played a typical hard cop, not, wanting to get close with his group mates and stuff and just like going home, doing his job, whatever. That was the only thing.
Yeah, there could have definitely been like more like why is he able to do that or something, moments of like alluding to his magic. There is one other moment though when they arrest the guy who has the sword in the street, like wilding out in the middle of an intersection.
Yeah.
When they arrest him and they're driving him back, he's talking to Jacoby and he's telling him that that Daryl Ward, he's a blessed one or something. And of course, like, you're like, who knows the mental state of this man? So you might have taken that with a grain of salt. So I did notice that moment. But yeah, there could have definitely been more hints at like him winding up being a bright. I feel like part of it though is like, even though Mr. Brian Tallarico was like, woo, there's a Bright in this movie, and it's not named Bright because the writers thought they were so clever. Part of me was like, he has to be the Bright for the title. Like, it wasn't Tika that I was like, oh, yeah, okay, she's a Bright movie title. Like, I was like, he has to be, like, one. And maybe that's just like the will bias of like me knowing he loves to do a movie where he like saves the day, saves the world, or is the one in some manner. So I did kind of pick up on those a little bit, but yeah, like I like this movie. I thought his performance was strong, and like it's no, like, we just saw some outstanding acting and collateral beauty and some vulnerability. So it's not a movie like that. It is like an action movie and sci-fi. So there's only so much you're gonna get. But I definitely think like, especially someone who's usually so goofy and funny and a crowd pleaser, for him to be so kind of like sour and like jaded and stuff was pretty like entertaining and better than After Earth. Like After Earth, he was like a dick to me. Like,
oh yeah, he was a very cold, distant, and even at the end when he like stood to salute his son, and his son's like, dude, fuck you, just give me a hug, man. Like,
yeah. At least this movie, like, being a cop, you can like it makes you like, of course he's kind of a dick, like he's a cop, like he's all kinds of shit all day. It's possibly in the threat of being killed. It's coming back from being shot, like, so
sure.
Makes sense. I do want to note that the opening credit, probably one of the production companies is named Trigger Warning, Entertainment,
Oh,
and I thought
uh-huh.
that was very what a name for income.
Hmm.
Impressive. That was just one of my first. So, also, he has a back tattoo in this. I wish we got more of that because
Yeah, I miss that.
I was like, where's the rest of this back tattoo? Hello,
Yeah.
like, but
What
it's in
was what
like,
was the choice to like give your character that if you're like not gonna fully see it, you know?
yeah, we didn't get
What
any
tease.
shirtless Will in the
I wish we
really
had.
run like
Yeah, it's
sequence.
funny. I mean, obviously he's a little bit older in
Depending
this
on
movie, but he's still doing a lot of great action in this movie, a lot of great shootouts, stunt work with like punching and hitting and like all the scenes where they're like going through the various like clubs and stuff were really good. Um, but we did not see nearly as much running as in like Enemy of the State, I, Robot, Bad Boys with the open shirt.
yeah. I mean, he didn't run a lot in Suicide Squad either. They like kind of moved at us together. So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe his running days are kind of older over, except we do get. But I also want to know his wife in this movie. I feel like they had like no chemistry. I was just like, this is white
Yeah, that's why I
lady.
didn't really want to bring it up again because I was like, what's her purpose? Like, what's
Who is she even?
like she's a nurse, okay.
His daughter was cute, little
Hmm.
biracial girl. Oh, and then I liked when she was like, "Your cop knows you." Like,
Yes.
what else? Oh, his driving commentary is what reminded me a lot of Mike
Hmm.
from Bad Boys because especially after they get Tika and they're fleeing from like the gang that's
Drive it like
after
you just
them.
stole it.
That and then it's like you're supposed to drive straight, not sideways, like that kind of stuff. I was waiting for him to be like, now that's how you drive, or like, now that's how you shoot, like
Yeah.
especially the last scene when Jacoby shoot Leia and
Mm.
he's like, that's great, but shoot her head.
Yeah.
Like shoot kill her. And so Jacoby's gun is empty. He's like, I'm out, like I can't. And so I was waiting for Jacoby to actually headshot her and him be like, no, that's how you shoot. Like so those moments are definitely moments that again tie back his other work in my opinion.
Hmm.
Apparently Margaret Cho's character too called out a cop when she's like assigning beats and stuff that was named Hancock, so I don't know if
Oh.
that's also his Shrek commentary made me
Oh,
think
that
of
was funny.
I Am Legend.
Uh-huh.
When he's like, you Shrek looking motherfucker. Like, so that was interesting. I was like, boy, I wonder he really must like
Yeah.
that must be the one that got away from him or something. What else? Oh, I did love the den of like the orc bad guy. Like,
Yes, the antler throne, the
yes,
decorations, the
the candles,
settings.
like
Oh, the little pigs.
the
Oh my gosh.
lighting.
I love I think there were a lot of really cool sets and scenes in this movie. The clubs that they walked through, a lot of really great practical effects, like when they crash through the convenience store or the gas station and they're
Yeah.
like she's like surf riding, Layla's like surf riding the car as they're trying to capture Jacoby and Ward to get the wand and stuff. So I really thought that the practical effects were great. And
Yeah, let's talk about
there's an awesome little kind of speed through video on YouTube that shows how they make the orcs. And what's really interesting is, before they do makeup on people, before they make like the plasters of their face and stuff, they first make like clay models of what they want their creatures to look like. So there was a lot of time and dedication, how they wanted to clearly like, make this group of creatures, but have them look so wildly different from the ones of the Lord of the Rings. They're very they always look like very greasy, um and they have very long hair. They're a lot more like piggish looking in their like snouts and faces.
yeah,
And
they say pigskin a lot, like as an
yes,
insult.
totally, totally. But I liked their take on the coloration of their skins. It kind of reminded me a little bit of when people have the like two tones.
Vitiligo.
Thank you. But like it was just really interesting that everyone's like coloration patterns were different. Some orcs had longer teeth than others. Some had like wider noses. So yeah, it was really interesting. So first they make these like clay images of what they want the people to look like, and then they'll make plasters based off of that. And then for Edgerton, they had to make a caster of his face. And I believe what he's wearing for most of the part is a mask that eventually gets kind of like plastered down around his neckline. And then that gets painted and prosthetics added to make this higher slits in the nose. And I really also loved that within the mask they also their cheekbones are very high up. And makeup for something like this would probably take minimum of like a couple hours to get your mask set in place, painted, have your ear prosthetics put on, and have everything. And like you have to paint your hands. Like any skin that's going to be exposed will need to match the rest of you as well. So that's probably why we don't see him in like a t-shirt very often. It's always usually a long sleeve.
Yeah. If you ever watch the show Face Off, the makeup process, I thought it was interesting on IMDb. It says that they chose to make this out of foam instead of latex, which if you watched Face Off, and there's different perks or like reasonings to use one over the other. But I think because of how much like action and stuff that he had to do, they went with the foam application and stuff, but also like how they were able to like put together background orcs and stuff from like the way they had a system in place. I thought was like really cool and smart, where they had like pieces that they could borrow from other molds and stuff that they had use that to like for the filler background people and stuff, make it look cohesive enough where it didn't seem like there is a lot of orcs in this movie, so it definitely didn't seem like, oh okay, there's like a few of them. Like they were like in there deep. So
yeah,
that was cool.
And I really liked that punk club, and that's where kind of like the orcs and like punks hung around. So it like showed that there was unity amongst humans and orcs. And that's like the great thing about punk music, is that I really think it's a great like unifier in a lot of way, because it's about like the message of the establishment to that group. So I loved that scene. I was just like a typical day at Warped Tour.
Yeah, definitely not hanging out with the elves. Like the elves are like at Nobu in Malibu, like chilling, not giving a care. Another part of the practical magic of this movie is a lot of the car crashes and like the gas station blowing up was like real. They really blew up a gas station.
Yeah. I like the far away shots too. Like you see it up close and far away of like, okay, no, that's real.
Yeah. So David Ayer made a real big deal about actually doing stuff, and there's not CGI in this movie, I don't think, at all. Maybe a little bit, but like definitely not reliant on it. And I think that excites me, because like we've talked about CGI a lot, and sometimes it's like so well done but like kind of overused or not really well done, and like, oh, why didn't you just do that with like a practice instead? But and sometimes I feel like CGI takes me out of it, like, and in this movie, having it be in the real world and not like some kind of like alternate Earth or something. It's just like that these creatures really existed and have lived throughout time and amongst us now. That, you know, there was no need really for like any kind of like weird landscapes or anything. They were in the heart of LA. So I feel like that speaks to the sets and the feeling stuff. It's also a really kind of dark movie, like the lighting and stuff. So I think that adds to the mood of it. But yeah, I really appreciated all the practical magic. Even Will on the ground being pushed by a car and shooting, like the car's backing up.
That was crazy.
Yeah. The one thing that took me out of it a little bit is that like the elves, like Layla and them, are like I said, they're like kicking ass, like some Kill Bill like type of stuff, like taking out whole SWAT team who have semi-automatic weapons and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But of course, when they get to the two main characters, they have extended fight scenes, or like the main characters are able to get away and stuff, and I'm like, but they were just killing people left and right, like no, not even blinking, and now all of a sudden we have a tussle, like, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just part of the movies. But sometimes it's just really well done where it's like, okay, yeah, they're better than them, but the elves would have kicked their ass if we're honest. Like
Oh
they
yeah.
wouldn't have stood a chance. So that part of it, I was just like, okay, yeah, they have to survive. They would have been fucked up. What did you think about the ending?
So in the ending, it is revealed Ward is a bright. He is able to wield the magic wand. He ends up destroying Layla, and Tika also disappears. And so when that whole conflict fight ends, they're looking, Tika, Tika, where are you? And Jacoby's just like, it's okay, she's gone. It's over, but she's gone. She's not with us. Like you blasted her kind of thing. But when Ward and Jacoby are being rewarded with like a ribbon of honor, medal of honor kind of thing, um, we see Tika walking amongst the crowd. So that got me thinking, well, how did she survive? And I think there was a sequel that was already greenlit prior to the first one being
Well,
done, that
yeah,
they're
exactly.
they're gonna be making or are making or haven't made or are thinking about it, doing a sequel to this movie. So that would be like the only reason why they would bring her back. But I was just like, but how? She got blasted. Unless
Well,
she
I
was in the
mean,
water. I don't
I
know.
don't know because that didn't bother me because I was like, well, Jacoby's still here. Like, he's not a bright and he was spared by Ward's magic. So
Mm.
maybe he was able to direct it enough to Layla that she's the only one affected by it. And Tika just like rolled into like that bathtub thing and like was like, you guys will see me later.
Yeah.
I will say that I did note that I so in the beginning of the movie, Ward's at home, his wife makes some coffee, and then there's like a fairy flying around eating their bird feeder or whatever. So
Uh-huh.
she's like, "Can you get rid of the fairy?" Blah blah blah. And this is how we're introduced to like this magical like creatures amongst the people. So he goes outside and he's like hidden the fairy with a broom and kills it or whatever. So the fairy like does like one of those like Tinkerbell like flies to the camera like overhead shot of that Medal of Honor ceremony after Ward spies Tika.
Yeah.
And so I just was like, did we need that fairy at the end? Like that was a bit too much for me where I was just like, really? Come on.
Yeah.
And then earlier I had said there were several points where I thought it was going to end, and so the end scene, they wind up having to go back to where they found Tika and the wand to try to help her because she's like injured by this point. And so after all that, after Ward finds out he's a bright, kills Layla, the whole place catches on fire, and so
Mm-hmm.
they come out. Jacoby comes out by himself and realizes Ward's still in there. We get a really long scene of him going back in and just the outside of the building. Like, are they going to come back? So I thought
Mm-hmm.
that was going to be the ending. And then finally he comes out with Ward. I was like, oh, okay, great. Because I was like, Will ain't dying in this movie. But so they come back out and then they're on the ground, and of course they have some like kind of cute banter like on the ground of like, okay, and it's like, yeah, like and then into I also would like to understand the orc like blood um
Oh,
line
yeah.
thing more.
I think it had something to do with like being accepted in your community or earning some kind of like special badge of honor as an orc. And so that night when or I guess it was the same night when they're in the orc temple and that leader orc's son was going to shoot Jacoby and Ward, and he said, no, I can't do it because this is the man who saved me, or this is the person who saved me, or whatever. He was just like, all right, you're gonna earn your orc colors tonight, or you're gonna earn your rite of passage, essentially. I don't know. Yeah, that was a little.
Well, I don't understand it because so two is that so to go back when the orcs catch them and take them to their den, they're gonna kill them. And like he said, the leader's son, he's like, my son's gonna earn his stripe, whatever. And so then we find out Jacoby, like that's the kid Jacoby let go, who he mistaken for who shot Ward. And so he can't be saved, let me go. And so they still shoot Jacoby.
Yes.
That's when we find out that Tika's the bright because she saves him. But then so they shoot him, he falls into like their pit like thing that's a hole. And when Tika saves him, he comes back up and then they're like, he has risen proper. And so after that they like were bowing and stuff, and I was like, oh, is he like the Supreme or something? Is he like Jesus? Like, he has risen, like, and they're just like, oh, okay, I'll be Jacoby. Like, I don't know. And then, but so I'm asking because after Jacoby pulls Ward out from the burning building, they're laying on the ground. He's like, say something. Are you okay? Like, and Ward just points, and then the like group of orcs are there, and then so Jacoby's like, oh, and then one of them cuts their, or they all cut their hand, and then they hold it up. And then Ward's like, oh, I bet you're a badass now that you're a blood brother. And so I was just like, I didn't quite understand. I was like, I thought he was already their supreme, but I guess even more now? I don't know.
Yeah, that was a little confusing.
Yeah. And then there was another point. So after, I thought it was going to end after that. I was like, okay, great. Like, Jacoby's accepted by orcs. Him and Ward have like gone through some shit and bonded. Cool. Then they're in the hospital and the feds come.
Oh, yeah. The magic feds come.
Yeah, I was just, and that, I would say that scene probably could have been cut, except for there's some outstanding comedy done by Joel Edgerton as Jacoby there, because he's over explaining what happened.
Yeah.
And Ward's just like, dude,
shut up.
Let them ask us what happened. And he's just like, and I didn't do that. That was like, it was crazy. She's a witch. And like, that was really funny. So I was like, okay, you could stay. But like after that, I was like, okay, great. They have this understanding what happened didn't really happen, blah, blah, blah. And I thought it was going to end there. And then we get the Medal of Honor ceremony. And I was like, fuck, man, like how much are they going to pull out of this? But yeah, I just thought like the tail end of the movie, I felt like wrapped it up pretty well. And it felt like a journey worth going on, whereas I had talked about, like, I didn't know what was going to happen this whole movie. And so sometimes endings, you're like, okay. And then sometimes you're like, okay, yeah, all right, that wasn't that bad. And that's how I felt at the end of it. I mean, how do you feel about potential?
I want them to do what they didn't do in this, which is add more pre-context. So maybe a prequel of like how they got to be in that world, I think would be kind of cool. And then that would be a way, like if they didn't want to include Will Smith or, whatever, but at least like have that element to it. I think a lot of questions would be answered. Or if they had a true sequel to it, I mean, I don't know. Hopefully we would see like more orcs on the police team, more diversity within their mythical world, more elevation and social status amongst, orcs, humans, and elves, having it be more equal. I think if they do have a sequel, I would like to see more commentary on, things that are relevant, like the crazy guy, and I don't like using the word crazy all the time, but the dude that was like wielding the sword and just like going crazy kind of reminded me of like those extremist right groups that when they go on these tangents just sounds absolutely so batshit crazy of like, oh my God, where is this coming from?
Well, a lot of his cop counterparts reminded me a lot of like kind of good people, Humana people, and and very much a cab. Like, I don't think all cops are bad, all that. So that's my stance on that. But they were definitely the bad seeds in that
Yes.
department. And them being like, he's an orc. We don't want his, amongst us. All that kind of stuff. I was just like, oh, brother, here we go.
I wonder if that's why this movie got such bad
Maybe.
reviews, because there were too many people that were like, stop making police officers look bad and corrupt.
Stop talking about racism.
hmm
Jeez, get over it. Like,
And then the next
so.
day they're tweeting about how they hate Little Mermaid.
And disliking the YouTube trailer teaser in the millions and the comments. Like, yeah. So, I mean, I would still, in my opinion, like, I don't know, this movie, the plot of it to me is so bookended that but it could be very Men in Black, where it's like,
Yeah.
you think like, okay, this was a great, different type of movie, different take, different world. Great, cool. I hope it's not. I liked Men in Black too, but I don't see this potential sequel going in that like bigger, better kind of like splashy type of way, or even Bad Boys 2, where it's just like bigger explosions, bigger car chases, more expensive Hummers and stuff. And I kind of still would like to see Bright be a series, and it would be cool to see like episodic stories being told of that world, and like
hmm
crimes and orcs, and even like there's two, we didn't really talk about them, but there's like a huge Latino kind of
Yeah.
gang population depicted. And I mean, I wish better for that group in terms of depictions, but two, I'm gonna say it, there weren't enough black people in this movie for me. His neighbors in the beginning was like, I feel like the only ones I saw, but like I was like, where's the black people at? Like, what are they
hmm
doing in this
And
world?
he kind of like made fun of them for
Well,
being,
he's a cop.
well,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, but yeah, he did. He's definitely not necessarily like the neighborhood cop who like grew up. Well, he probably did, but he's like one of those types that grew up and like feels like they're kind of better than the hood, but in some
Mm,
aspect, bro, you're still here. Like,
yeah.
and he's not a dirty cop like Training Day, where like Denzel's character was like, I run this, and like I'm a cop, but I have my hand in the street or my ear to the ground, and I know what's going on. Like,
hmm
King Kong ain't got shit on me. Like, he couldn't do that in his neighborhood. They would have looked at him and been like, what? Like,
Yeah.
but and he was trying to move. He was like, I'm trying to sell my house.
Yeah.
And they're just hanging out here like this. And he was very, it seemed like he was like, when Jacoby came to pick him up, it felt like he was ashamed of being a cop, kind of. He was
A
like,
little
why would
bit.
you drive here? Like, don't ever pick me up from. And
hmm
then his daughter came out, which I was like, questionable. Like, why would she think they were gonna go Kobe, if okay, go, like your dad's gonna drop you off, like. But anyways, so he's like, yeah, we can drop her off, and he's like very excited, very like, again, naive and gullible, and he's just like, this is not an Uber, like the cop car is not an Uber, like we're not gonna drop my daughter off in a cop car.
hmm
Which to me is like, well, why not, you're a cop, like. So I, yeah, maybe there's more behind like his feelings of being a cop, and that like, again, like kind of like Will, I guess, talked about with like, the inner turmoil and understanding of like trying to protect and serve, not be biased, and all that kind of stuff, and like him trying to reckon.
hmm
Um, but yeah, all right. Well, so clearly we enjoyed Bright probably more than Brian did, but do you have a snack and a cocktail for this movie?
I do. I don't have a specialty craft cocktail. I thought about looking one up, but there's a scene where they all got beat up pretty badly, and they were in like one of those grimy bathrooms at the club. And he had like a tall boy of Budweiser. The label was pretty covered, but you can see the cursive of the Weiser part. And I was like, all right, cool. I'll do a tall boy of Bud. And I was so inspired by the crystal blue of the magic wand, because when you wield it, it'd be this like bright lightsaber blue. I'm going blue foods, man. I'm talking like all the blue raspberry candies. It reminded me of the rock candy on a stick, like that's bright blue. Blue Takis, just like a blue charcuterie board of blue food.
I'm blue, Baba. I will say that the orc like pattern of makeup or their skin kind of reminds me of that shot we looked up with the blue carousel. It's like the alien brain, and it was
Oh
like the
yeah.
white
Uh-huh.
cloud of
Uh-huh.
like Kahlua or something.
Yes.
But yeah, I was thinking beer. Maybe I've never had one, but I kind of always try one. But maybe since this is South LA, I'm gonna go like a 40 ounce for the podcast. And then food wise, like LA proper would be like tacos or something, but I really want like a cheesesteak hoagie, or just like some sloppy sandwich, like after a long day of work that just like I deserve this. I earned shit. Sorry, keep hitting the mic. Sorry. But just some kind of big sloppy sandwich of like, maybe it could be a torta then, but like of like, oh, I've earned this, and it's just like dripping, and there's like steak fries, and I'm drinking my 40 in my lawn chair on my lawn that's not growing back. So yeah, that's my pick. Anything else that I missed?
I'm good to wrap up.
All right. Well, wrapping it up. Thank you for listening to this week's episode, and to the people who stuck with us so far. Please come back for another episode of, I don't know, should we be, I don't know, maybe we're like the cool punk club
There you go.
version of Inside the Actor's Studio, baby. Spike up that hair, get your mohawks ready.
And if you like us enough to stick around, take another deep dive down this fantasy rabbit hole, because we are going to be discussing Will Smith in the Disney live action adaptation of Aladdin, baby. We're sticking on that blue theme. He's blue. Dabba-dee, dabba-die.
I didn't even realize that. Oh
I'm
my God.
so excited.
I know you are, because we actually saw this movie together when it came out. So, yes, you're in for a treat. But on that note, if you've got nothing better to do, go figure out a theme to watch a bunch of movies you've never seen. Maybe a blue theme.
There you go. Ooh, what are blue theme movies? Okay, there's Blue Velvet. There's
Blue Crush.
Blue Crush. There's so much.
There
Okay.
has to be a movie.
I'm your host, Simone. Leave us a like if you're into it. Subscribe to This Blessed Mess. I just recently went back and checked to see some of our views, because I showed my Aunt Connie where to find our podcast on Apple and like what our logo looks like. And I realized that there is a new review on there that has bumped our rating down just a little bit. Hey man, sometimes press is good press, or whatever they say about it, but the person says they complain too much, and I'm like,
What episode did you listen to?
I don't, maybe, so I was like, well, are they listening to like a Woody Allen one? Was it the Ants episode?
I like to think, like, especially because I don't really, oddly enough, listen to movie podcasts a lot. I like to think that we are pretty positive when a lot of people, like, we could have totally, completely shit on Wild Wild West, the whole thing, but, like, we could have totally shit on After Earth, the whole thing. We could have shit on this movie, the whole thing, because that was the critical response to this movie. We could have shat on plenty of J-Lo movies besides the Backup Plan, but
Yes.
maybe they listen to that episode.
Maybe I have to. Okay, so here it is. It's not even they complain too much. It's super whiny, just really bad. Don't listen to whatever this is. 1 star by Bounty Hunter Bob. So fuck you, Bounty Hunter
Bob.
Bob.
Sound like our target market, anyways.
Does not. Sounds like a Rick Flag type. So you can go over to that side of podcast land and tune into that.
Well, I mean, this is. I don't care, because when we started our outros before, we would kind of say, leave us a review. There's only, like, if you're gonna leave a bad review, give some constructive criticism.
What are
were
we
so
whining
negative?
about?
Yeah, what were we complaining about? And I don't know. I'm so disillusioned. I don't know, like, no fucks given anymore with, like, stuff that, like, I don't know what people want from us, me, social media. So yeah, if you don't like it, whatever, that's fine. Go bounty hunt something, Bob.
It was like the gripe we had with Collateral Beauty. The review just bitched about it, but didn't say what the problem was. So there's no issue if you want to leave us a 1-star review, but you're like, here's some things that I have issues with.
And I mean, if we complain about stuff, I feel like we at least give context to, like, we're just not like, yeah, this movie was really bad, and, like, the acting was just really bad and just over the top, and I didn't get it. Like, we definitely go into, like, I didn't really like this because this confused me. Like, we Lil Raj it. We don't Brian or that one lady for Collateral Beauty it, where it's just like, yeah, this was just like a mess for me. Lil Raj at least says, like, you know what? This confused me. I had a lot of questions about this. Like, I wasn't sure about this. There could have been better stuff. Whatever. Clearly, that guy has better to do.
Truly. But if you have nothing better to do, you can listen to our podcast. And Bria, where else can they find us on the social realms?
I'm your host, Bria, and it would be awesome for you to wipe off those buttery popcorn fingers and give us a review. And if you review us, please tell us what you like or exactly what you don't like. Don't be a pussy about it and not say
Bob,
what you want to say.
Don't be a pussy.
Also, if you only listen to one episode, say what episode you listened to.
Yeah.
Like, I'm really curious what we were so whiny about. But anyways, follow us on social media at Roll Call Pod on Instagram, TikTok, and Problematic Fave Twitter, and listen to us on YouTube if you find. And this has been another episode of
Roll Call and Cut.